When I first put this course together, some of it was such, and some of it was adhering to a very particular curriculum, although it's really got a unique input, such as the nature of this college and the way in which we like to do things. But when we first put it together, I was really proud to announce, and we, I announced it far and wide, that the Anglo-European College of Therapeutic Hypnosis became one of just 5 UK-based schools and colleges, and just one of 7 in the entire world that were formally approved by the GHSC, the General Hypnotherapy Standards Council, as far as this particular qualification was concerned. So what that meant, and what that means for anybody taking this particular course, for example, is that anyone that attends and then achieves the expected levels of attainment with the learning outcomes for this qualification, does the coursework, submits the vignettes, they'll be able to add the title of Advanced Hypnotherapist to the list of stuff that they already have to their email signatures or their website bio or business cards. And I know what you're thinking, woohoo. Yes, get in. But that's not all, and I'm being a little bit ironic there because, not all of us are necessarily just driven by letters after the name, although graduates of this course can also use the letters ADV, HIP, DIP. So for those of you who have just got a hip dip now, you now get an ADV, HIP, DIP. Again, woohoo, here we go, yes, this is it. We're nailing our career, we're running up that hill. And of course, as I wrote at the time, it's compulsory that as a result of that you then wear a golden cape in your therapy room or your office each day. And for those of you that are not familiar with my sense of humour, that will not be compulsory. Okay, that was just a quip. All right, I just can't help being so hilarious sometimes. Now I recognise that some of those things may not be what the major appeal of advanced hypnotherapy training are. But I think there's a slightly more serious and sober note, and an important note, and the reason that I want to start today off on this particular topic. That is because I think recognition and the letters is something that a lot of people do work incredibly hard to get, and they become really proud. And the idea is that, if within this field we're looking to promote high standards and the development of this field and bring it in from the fringes, then of course, certain letters and certain titles help us a little bit as far as that's concerned. But with or without the formal approval, accreditation and recognition, there are many other reasons that I think advanced hypnotherapy training is something that I was incredibly keen to deliver. And the reason that I've invested a lot of heart and soul into the way in which we do things here at this college, but also the way in which we're going to continue delivering this particular course over the next week. You see, I think my own engagement with the hypnotherapy field and community, and my own current profile and the way in which I do my best to adhere to kind of evidence-based and a certain degree of standards, does tend to highlight, and in my experience, it really does tend to highlight the need for advanced hypnotherapy training. If you have a good examination of, and you have a good robust look at, the more conventional psychological professions in the mental health care field, psychologists undergo many years of training and studying and researching and practice. Psychiatrists attend medical school and then have many subsequent years of training, researching, studying. Mental health nurses undergo many years of training, and the vast majority of other talk therapies even tend to require more intense, prolonged amounts of study, research, practice, in order to work with the general public using their chosen modality of therapy, certainly more than the vast majority of hypnotherapists. Most hypnotherapists, and typically will have 10 months of training, gain a diploma, and then are sent out into the world as a professional. And the truth is that the vast majority of hypnotherapists that I have met are struggling to make a living and are very often ill-equipped to do so. Of course, there are lots and lots of marketing gurus out there, business development experts, who claim to have answers, systems, gimmicks that you apply universally, but often simply attempting to make more money for themselves to supplement their own ailing therapy service. And those that seek out the answers this way are often left wanting. Being able to brilliantly market oneself does not actually necessarily solve the answer or solve the problem and produce answers. My answer, and one of the things that I've really committed to, has been that the best way to develop one's business and one's professional standing as a hypnotherapist is to become better at what you do. Of course, the masses of hypnotherapists that I encounter each year, conferences, conventions, and on trainings and CPD events, for example, many people that have attended courses that are practicing as hypnotherapists, the course curriculum didn't even match national occupational standards for a minimum number of classroom hours attended, for example. Some people have not even attended 100 hours of classroom tuition. Many are being taught the same perpetuated and flawed nonsense very often. Pseudoscience and myth punctuates a lot of what they're doing, and the teachers very often are spewing and recycling lots of this, because they themselves were taught that particular method and that particular model, and that they never considered questioning any of that stuff. The truth is that many hypnotherapists simply are not good enough, and their clients do not get long-term benefits from their investment of time and money. When a hypnotherapist is genuinely very good and knowledgeable and skilled, in addition to their good quality interpersonal skills and softer skills, they get better results in their therapy room. When they get better results in their therapy rooms, their business flourishes. They get referrals, people talk about their wonderful experiences with that therapist, and a foundation of success and competence and credibility is forged. Of course, there's more to developing a successful business, but this point that I'm making here is key. Hypnotherapists who do not think in these terms are often looking in the wrong direction for their answers and for solutions. They invest their limited budget on attempting to find answers in things like certain online systems or social media marketing, search engine optimization, swish websites, and all kinds of other gimmicks that are promoted by certain gurus who cannot prove how busy their own therapy rooms are, for example, when instead perhaps hypnotherapists should consider and be considering investing in their single main asset, and that is themselves and their own ability as a hypnotherapist. You see, as a hypnotherapist, you offer a service, you offer hypnotherapy, and you're offering that delivered by yourself. It's quite an isolated, lonely role, the role of a hypnotherapist. You've got to be viable. Perhaps you've got to be outstanding, an outstanding option in the eyes of your existing and potential clients. So hypnotherapists read, they research, they learn how to develop themselves in a wide variety of ways, and I think that's important. Being able to apply ourselves in accordance perhaps with Stephen Covey's 7 habits of successful people, learning how to be productive, how to develop one's soft skills, how to sharpen our brain, how to be fit and healthy. All these things are going to do us good. Yet so many hypnotherapists, they get their diploma, Then they decide, I'm going to learn EFT on a one-day workshop. I'm going to learn how to become a Reiki master in a couple of days. I'm going to tack on a number of add-ons that they can list within their bios, their email signatures, their business cards, and assume that they never need to train anymore in hypnotherapy. That's it, I've done my 10 months, I've got my diploma, I don't need anything else. I'm there. They think they've got it nailed, and they've invested a lot of time and money in that initial diploma training, and they don't think that that needs to be built upon. And I think this is the major limiting problem within the field of hypnotherapy. You see, that line of thought is exactly why hypnotherapists do need advanced hypnotherapy training. Primarily because they clearly need critical thinking skills. And we laboured that in our first 5 days together. You all know. Some of you nearly U-turned and didn't come back because we went into it so heavily. You know, critical thinking skills equip you to examine the field and become more effective as a result, how to examine what it is that you are doing within yourself. I've heard individuals glibly suggest that much of what I'm talking about here is purely academic. Yet evidence suggests that the client will derive more benefit and gain from an in-depth, correct understanding of our subject and will perceive the hypnotherapist as being far more credible. When a hypnotherapist is perceived as credible by the client, the perception and the belief will also advance the efficacy of the treatment. You guys know this much. So let me just recap. A couple of the elements that we've covered and some of the reasoning, some of the things that we've done so far. You see, we want to enable the hypnotherapist to engage with more challenging academic literature in hypnotherapy, for example, including examining and looking at hypnotherapy research, applying critical thinking skills. Critical thinking and a scholarly mindset also develops credibility with medical professionals and creates an attitude that advances the professional and personal life of the hypnotherapist. Some of those elements that we've already looked at include things like being a sophisticated listener and reader, how to critique claims that are made in hypnotherapy circles, especially in training and by peers in online forums and stuff. We looked at, in some depth, logical and academic argumentation, how to recognise logical fallacy, how to debate effectively. We looked at levels of analysis and levels of abstraction, how hypnotherapists work at different levels. We looked at challenging some of the received wisdom. That is, we gave a critical examination of much of what is taken for granted in our profession, things that have not been proven but continue to get perpetuated, in order to develop the practitioner's critical thinking and our critical thinking. But my main point here, just starting us off today, is that many hypnotherapists do not believe that they need advanced hypnotherapy training. So is there a need for it at all then? If the most think that, why do hypnotherapists need an advanced training? What's the point? What is the point that I'm making? My belief is that an advanced hypnotherapy training is not just something that's helping the hypnotherapist to build more success and to develop success with clients, build a better business, but also developing the entire field of hypnotherapy and the perception of it. The field of hypnotherapy currently is very much on the fringe. At best, it's at the fringe of therapy and the psychological fields. And an incessant belief that you have all the training that you need with your initial diploma, it's a popular one. It's a popular thought. And one that's potentially keeping the field of hypnotherapy on the fringes. Some of the needs for an advanced hypnotherapy training are as follows. I think we improve the standards and service to the public. We engage newly qualified hypnotherapists with quality CPD, and we see its value, but also invigorating and informing the practice of experienced practitioners, seasoned professionals. We encourage a higher level of academic and critical thinking. We instill the importance of better quality reflective practice, something we've spoken about a lot earlier on in this course, and we're going to examine a little bit more later on this week when we start looking at our own ongoing professional development. We want to promote some new perspectives and build a diverse range of approaches, but also properly understand the evidence base of the field of hypnotherapy. And that is, something, I was recently the keynote speaker at the UK Hypnosis Convention, and one of the things I spoke about was the fact that virtually every hypnotherapist on all of my news feeds was sharing this research by David Spiegel, saying, yes, we've found that the brain is, certain parts are lighting up in the brain every time people are hypnotized, yet what they didn't, and they were just sharing this story. Yeah, this is evidence, but nobody actually had even read the research or examined what academics were saying about it, because it was highly flawed in the eyes of many. Something else, essentially the Spiegel study was science by press release, something that we'll talk about a little bit more later on this week, and we'll give a robust examination of that particular study, and I'll show you why it's considered to be flawed. But also that we start to know the literature well, and that the literature then underpins our practical skills and advances them in turn. We want to embed some core training concepts by revisiting certain things in a new light, and as well as patching in some important knowledge and skills that perhaps the initial training may have missed or may have been taught in a slightly different way by different schools. And to become a more successful hypnotherapist whose clients derive greater gains and successful benefits. But us as hypnotherapists are not the only ones who benefit from this. By becoming better at what they do, they get to raise the standards of the field in general terms. And this is good for all of us because the perception of the public becomes better and rosier, and it's better for clients who derive more gain, more professionalism, better results. The raison d'etre, then, for an advanced hypnotherapy training program is to offer the hypnotherapist a clear advancement of their original training. That's what we're wanting to do with our previous week together and with this week together, to show you and demonstrate and have a tangible, clear advancement of where you are at. That's wholly distinctive and that's healthily challenging, not simply offering more of the same. I'm hoping, there's going to be nothing rehashed, nothing that we teach at diploma level represented to you here. It's got to provide new knowledge, new skills, new philosophies, new approaches, new techniques, and encourages a considered, respectful, healthily critical exploration of the hypnotherapy field and the research that supports it. So, to revert to an earlier point that I made as well, advanced hypnotherapy diploma course such as this needs to have a good return on investment. And I want us to be held accountable for that, as far as you are all concerned. That is, that this course needs to help you all and any hypnotherapist partaking in it develop their skills, their knowledge, their abilities, and that in turn grows the hypnotherapist's business in an effective fashion, a point I've made several times already this morning. So, I've written about it and I've spoken about it. There is a major danger of treading water as a hypnotherapist. Any of you ever do the bronze swimming certificate, silver swimming certificate, and the gold swimming certificate? Do you remember those? Where you got an actual badge in a small plastic case. Do you ever see that? Remember those enamel badges that you weren't allowed to actually wear, just kind of kept them. But in order to get one of those, you had to tread water in your pyjamas, because if you're ever going to get washed out to sea, you're going to be in your pyjamas when you're doing it. So treading water in your pyjamas, making a raft out of your pyjama bottoms. I don't know if you need to know, you would tie a knot in one end and one of the legs, then up the other leg, blow it up, and because it was water, because it was wet, it would become like a raft. It was very clever. Even better if you wore rubber pyjama bottoms. But in this instance, it stayed afloat for a while. It would be quite awesome. And also having to fetch a really heavy rubber brick from the bottom of the deep end. These are the kind of things that you would need to do in order to get your bronze swimming certificate. BSc. Better put BSc after your name for bronze swimming certificate, like Arnold Rimmer in Red Dwarf. But even more important, at the end, you would have to tread water in your pyjamas. You would have to tread water in your pyjamas for a period of time, while your teacher timed you. And it's the notion of treading water that I'm kind of mewing my way around this morning. I dispute that by treading water, you're not falling behind. Because a lot of people use the term, treading water as I'm just keeping up, I'm maintaining. But when it comes to being a hypnotherapist, I think I dispute the idea that if you're treading water, you're kind of staying on par. Because actually, my belief is that simply by treading water, you're actually falling behind. Recently, at my son's birthday party, we had a weekend celebrating. It's a lot of my son's birthday falls right near to Halloween, and so we dressed up. I was the only dad to dress up, and met a lot of the other dads for the first time. So I started doing that, hi, hi madam, nice to meet you. A lot of them thought, a bit peculiar, that dad. But at the party, I was chatting away to one of the other dads, and as we attempted to decipher whether the screams that were coming from one of the corners of the room were screams of fun and joy, or screams of children being murdered and injured, or mortally wounded, he mentioned to me, this particular dad, mentioned to me how much he was looking forward to his children being older. And he painted such a wonderful picture of how his life was going to be when he could discuss mature topics with them. He could do different types of activities, and the children would require less hands-on attention all of the time. And I thought it was great. He had this positive image of how he wanted things to be. However, he told of how he struggled to enjoy the children right now, at this stage, and he found them exhausting. And he was going to sort of skip through these next few years in a bit of a haze. I'm excited about those future days too, from my own point of view. They're not, but these ones coming up are certainly not going to be without challenge. I don't think there's any age range of children that's going to be without any kind of challenge that is unique to that time in their lives. What about learning how to make the most of now? I didn't say that to him, but I think learning to love the stage that your children are at, regardless, is learning to enjoy being alive. You don't wish away your entire life. Life is happening right now. You ought to be learning how to enjoy it, how to make each moment count. The kind of stuff that we all know, that we teach our clients and talk to people about. Plus the time and the joy that you have now are going to pay dividends later on. You have a better relationship with your children when they are older, stronger foundations, and when you reflect upon your life, it'll be coloured and flavoured with that enjoyment that you invested in the now. Every stage of life comes with its own challenges, but the remedy is not just to kind of wish that stage of life away. And this man was basically treading water with his children until they grow, and he'd fitted his vision for being, life was going to be more enjoyable at a later age, as far as he was concerned. When I've been going through big training schedules with my running programs and with marathon and ultramarathon training, I've been charting certain things and talking about certain things, and the key is always that you've got to get on and enjoy the training, rather than just thinking these are just miles I need to get through. Likewise, my brother and I talk about the fact that he really called me out on this particular notion. We were running a 15-mile race in Alton once, and it was a really high standard race, and him and I were second to last and third to last. Thank goodness for that woman that was back there somewhere struggling and limping around. Thank goodness for her. And and I said to him, God, I'm going to be pleased to get to the end of this. And he did. He called me out on this. He said, look where we are. We're in this beautiful country lanes. It was a wonderfully sunny, crisp morning. Him and I were together, he's my best friend, and we were spending time together, catching up and chatting. And there I was, just talking about how much I wanted to get to the end. And really called me out on this idea that rather than just wanting to get through stuff, that actually we enjoy that journey and we enrich it as much as we can. And this is where I'm going with this point, and the reason I'm labouring it, and I'm attempting to offer up so many ways of describing this, because I mentioned earlier, I speak to a lot of hypnotherapists about their work and about their businesses, and I encounter many hypnotherapists who struggle with this. And one of the things that Keith and I came up against when we were starting to talk about advanced hypnotherapy training, and this was a new idea, and people were saying to us, yeah, I'm interested, was that quite a lot of people were saying, yeah, I just want to wait and see how things go for a while before I commit. I understand that, very typical. Or I want to practice my current skills for a bit longer before I develop new ones, or before I take on any more study or training. And typically what happens, and as we followed up and as we've had ongoing discussions with the same people, is that they then tread water. They struggle to get to the place that they really want. And they start to doubt that it will actually be possible at all. And instead of treading water, they could have invested in their own development and learned how to build an effective business and learned how to build upon their existing skills. Typically, with some of the examples I gave earlier, with psychologists and psychiatrists and medical doctors and mental health nurses, for example, they don't always just go out and be self-employed for a year and before then coming back to their study or going out and doing that for 5 years. Of course, they do a lot of practicing on the job with their study and working with real people. But the same is there's an issue that is quite true of hypnotherapists and their own knowledge and their own skill development, that they've learned about continued professional development, but they tend to pay lip service to it. Once a hypnotherapist has completed a diploma level training, they think it's going to see them through forever, and that they've now learned what they need to learn in order to be a successful hypnotherapist. Those people, I'm sorry to say, are doing the field of hypnotherapy a disservice as well. But having invested time in a diploma course, expended effort, and of course spent money in initial training, our budding hypnotherapist now believes that he or she is somehow entitled to a career. You'll do better if you're good at what you do, but there's more than just being a good hypnotherapist. Learning how to create a thriving hypnotherapy business is learning how to enjoy the business development aspects of it too. And many hypnotherapists end up merely treading water, focusing out into the distant future, grasping at things, or grasping that things are going to change at some point. Yet taking decisive action within the moment is very often what makes one's career, investing one's time, resource, and our brain in knowledge, academic development, research and understanding. There are many out there that are really thriving in this field and who are rediscovering each day the same level of joy that they had when they first chose to invest themselves in this field. You know, when people first get into this field, they become really excited by it because very often they've had some personal experiences. As they're learning, it's really enjoyable. But somehow and somewhere along the line, and through the process of treading water, they lose a little bit of that sparkle and that magic. And so I think investing in one's own development and investing in more advanced training is a great way to keep that there. And the final point that I want to make on this subject before we start getting on to our course, my clicker is unplugged, is this idea. I wrote about this a little while ago. And I'm just going to mention it in the context of NLP to begin with. You know, people go on a 7-day course and become a practitioner. Then they go on a 9-day course to get a certificate that says that they are a master. And you proudly share this with the world and put it on your website. Yeah, I'm a master practitioner. But why not? Why wouldn't you do that? You know, you've got a certificate, you've got 16 days of training, and you've spent a lot of money. So, you know, I'm guessing that I could probably, I probably need to recognize the fact that this is likely to ostracize me a little bit from plenty of people within the hypnotherapy and the NLP field. Just this summer gone, the Rio Olympics. Yay, I love the Olympics. There are people that have dedicated much of their lives to their sporting pursuits. They are the greatest sports people in the world, the cream of the sporting world. Yet very, very few claim to have mastered their sport, or even consider professing to be a master of it. Even the most decorated Olympians tend to believe that they've got more to learn and that they've got improvements that they can make, and they strive towards the ideal of mastering their sport. In a similar vein, I don't know if you've ever watched world-leading ballet dancers that show very similar gymnastic ability to some of the Olympic gymnasts. Yet having to dance with additional grace at the same time as that sort of gymnastic excellence, with such attention to detail. The world-leading ballet dancers don't consider themselves masters, necessarily. Can you imagine if a leading ballet dancer was to announce to the world, following 16 days of training, I'm a master ballet dancer? It wouldn't happen. You know, of course, there are exceptions to most things. Chess, perhaps a couple of other sports do use the term for those that have reached the pinnacle of the field. Maybe they've played and beaten some former masters, or played at the highest level, or studied with other masters, and so on. But can we really compare the achievements of practitioners in our field to those chess masters? What about world-leading physicists, Nobel Prize winners, even doctors who undergo many, many years of training and practice under continued tutelage? They're then monitored, have years of professional practice. Are they then labeling themselves master doctor? No, they aren't. Again, after 16 days of medical school, would he or she be able to pronounce themselves a master doctor? Perhaps if they attended one of those overseas unaffiliated universities that ordain you as a minister at the same time, give you the prefix which to go with your doctor title. But if I sort of gather some perspective and stop frothing of the mouth just for a moment, I understand that people would like to be able to offer credibility and some assurance to prospective clients. However, I don't want to question whether it's really ethical to suggest that you are a master of something after 16 days of training, and in many cases less. Is it really ethical to consider yourself even a practitioner with just 7 days training? What about professional practice? Depth of experience of dealing with an array of clients, varying issues. What about having studied the depth and breadth of the field and even understanding the research of it before being labelled a master? Many of those that I encounter who title themselves master in this field very often have little clinical experience to back it up with, don't know much beyond the Ericksonian approach to hypnosis, for example. When asked basic questions about opposing perspectives or alternate perspectives, or perhaps about specific research or clinical experience, I'm often confronted with a rather blank expression, leading then to defiance and resistance. Some of you might be thinking the same kind of thoughts now even. I can find no real way of ever using the term master in this particular field necessarily. If we look at the literal definition of the term, it can be used to mean a number of things. Historically, the word has been used as a noun, master. A man who has people working for him, for example. Now, there might be some hypnotherapists out there who have servants, but they're unlikely to be as a result of their hypnotherapy skills. Though some of us might make some cliched quips about using hypnosis for such. As a noun, again, it could mean a person who has complete control of something. Again, we could offer up some cliched quips about being able to control others, but we can't use hypnosis to absolutely control others. However, this use of the word usually results or refers to being a master of the situation, of master of the house, for example. It could mean someone who's in charge of a group or an organisation. Again, this limits us to a single person at a time. And though there's a number of hypnotherapy and NLP organisations, there's not enough to explain why we have so many master hypnotherapists and NLP practitioners in the world. So I can't really understand the use of the word in this particular way. Secondly, the term master could refer to a skilled practitioner or a particular art form or activity. Even if you are cited as being a virtuoso, a professional, someone who is adept or a star, even a prodigy, these are synonyms of master. Can that be extended to being a master too? If I skip past people that have master's degrees, that train and certainly learn for more than 16 days, I think I can probably skip over that use of the word master, and probably skip over the use of the word master, which is about a boy becoming a man. Before you're a master before you earn the title of Mr. around the age of something. We sometimes refer to a master copy as an original of something, but I don't really think that there being so many masters within this field allows us that. So it kind of brings us to a definition of having or showing very great skill or proficiency, usually denoting a person skilled in a particular trade, able to teach others, or similarly to acquire complete knowledge in a skill or in a technique or within that art form. And I suspect most people would err on the side of this interpretation and explanation with regards to calling themselves a master practitioner in NLP or hypnotherapy, for example. But does that number of days in class really entitle you to call yourself such? I guess it's open for further debate. During my own encounters with so many hypnotherapists or NLP master practitioners, there are almighty gaps in their knowledge. The NLP master practitioner, it only examines the Ericksonian model of hypnosis, and that's just one small, tiny slither of the entire field of hypnosis approach. And as a principle of this particular college that prides itself on robust depth and breadth of knowledge and education, of course, I've got to question that. I've got to question whether it's okay to tell the public that you've mastered this subject or mastered the field under those conditions. Usually, I think there is far, far more for us to learn. And there's always room for some improvement. I got a master practitioner of NLP from the Society of NLP that I received many years ago. And upon reflection, I was not equipped following that training to call myself a master. I don't use that title today, in fact. And this is not a slight upon the training itself. The training itself was great. But usually a training is the start of the path aiming towards mastery, or something closer to it. It's more a reflection upon the proliferation of people in these fields that call themselves a master of it, which I tend to dispute. And is another reason that I think that this field needs advanced training. I know that people are proud of what they do. I know that they're proud of their qualifications. And I know that you all, and you people that are watching this, have invested plenty of time and money in those trainings. But have you honestly and truly mastered the subject? I know I haven't. I doubt I ever will master it fully, exhaustively. Some of us may master aspects of what we do, but that may need some qualification before making that reference to ourselves. The key this morning is for us to get a really good understanding as to why we're doing this at all, and to bring some of these ideas together. That is, actually, this is a pathway that we're on, that we're not just treading water, we're looking to advance, and we're looking to promote an internal culture of ongoing development, aiming to start along the pathway to mastery rather than just supposing that we are masters as a result of qualification. That it is an ongoing process, and that the rationale for an advanced training is that we're looking to invest ourselves much more emphatically and have the humility to be able to think that perhaps there's more to learn, and perhaps it will be good for our business, good for our field, and good for us personally.